Riot's new fighting game 2XKO recently had a huge alpha test, and I decided to get as ahead of the curve as I could by grinding out as many games as possible. So I set out with the goal of hitting 300 games in the alpha lab before it goes away. I learned a lot, had a ton of fun, and was getting the hang of it by the end of the playtest. I've got a lot of feedback and thoughts about the state of 2XKO, but for now, my main priority was just to get as good as possible in the next 10 days. If you weren't able to get into the Alpha Lab, this will be the perfect video for you, because I'm going to be going into a ton of explanations about the game's mechanics and how I best utilize them myself as a beginner. But without wanting to waste any more of your time, let's hop right into the challenge. Alright, time to lay out the restrictions I'll be working with. The Alpha Lab lasts from August 8th to the 19th inclusive, so that's 12 days total. But I got the key too late into the 8th and I was already asleep. And I needed to reserve the 19th as a day to capture any necessary footage I was missing at the end. So that left me with 10 days to get 300 games done. Or about 30 games a day. Might not seem like a lot, but I'll get into why it's a challenge in a little bit. For the time being, I needed to learn the basics before jumping into any games, and there was a lot of new mechanics I was woefully unfamiliar with. The first one being pretty obvious, this was a tag fighter. Now this was the first time I'd even played a tag fighter in my life, and my assist usage was practically non-existent for the first 100 days, so we'll be leaving that portion for a bit later. The other big notable change was the lack of any motion inputs at all, with all special moves being mapped onto 2 special buttons. It was a bit weird to adjust to at first, but I quickly got used to it, and really I think this change isn't as big as a lot of people might make it out to be. But with all of that out of the way, it was time to get myself a main that I'd stick to for the rest of this challenge. I ended up trying out a bunch of characters, which all felt really fun in this game, but ultimately settled on Echo and Yasuo. I really enjoyed that both characters had a lot of complexity behind them, and some pretty nasty mix-up options even without calling in an assist. They didn't have the best range on them, but their speed was more than enough to make up for that in my eyes. I learned a pretty basic combo for the 2 of them, both of which being just simple conversions off of light medium heavy launcher, and then started hopping into games immediately. These first few games I didn't really have a solid game plan going in, and I was just experimenting with a lot of different attacks, and soon enough picked out a couple key moves for these early days. Echo's Timewinder was huge for a majority of these games. It's a decently fast, long-lasting projectile that you can knock into your opponents, and if it's out for long enough before they get hit, you get a huge stun to combo off of. Yasuo importantly had Wind Wall, which not only blocked projectiles, but also empowered both his specials in massive ways, though the time it takes to get them off does leave you a bit susceptible to them just running up and hitting you. Yeah, that happened a lot. Mostly cause I was not paying attention and just single-mindedly was throwing out Wind Wall empowered specials, but I digress. I didn't play very good during these early games because, well, obviously I was new, but I still had a ton of fun messing around with other characters in between the games that I wanted to actually take seriously, and after a few days I was starting to realize these games felt like they were taking a long time to complete. This really had less to do with the fact that it was a tag game that was running best of 3 rounds, and more to do with the fact that I was pretty consistently timing out since my game plan early on was really just to play super passively on Echo, then set up wind walls on Yasuo, making these first 100 games a slog to get through. Just know though that this won't really be too much of a problem by the end of the challenge. The games went on and I kept discovering new useful moves or interactions that helped me out. I was starting to get pretty into the game. Pulling off combos, setting Oki, Echo just really seemed like the typical archetype I enjoyed in previous fighting games. Partway through the week I remembered that I actually had a burst, and from there these 100 games, while not clean in the slightest, were at least a great soft landing before the barren hellscape that was the next 200 games. But before moving on, at the end of these 100 games I'd gone through and done a little bit of research into the game to figure out a couple places in my game plan that could use a bit of improvement. First up, I needed to learn to hit confirm with heavy to medium. This first section I'd been hitting medium straight into launcher since I didn't want to push my opponents too far back, but right now, learning to just hit confirm was going to be crucial. Secondly, on defense, I was severely underusing the game's honestly very rich defensive options. More specifically, Retreating Guard, which pushes you back after a block, though it can be poked by a low, and Push Block, which sends your opponents completely out of both of your ranges. I also had to learn to better use my assist calls, have a combo end with a mix-up, and convert off of an anti-air, but those I'll save for later explanations in a later section. A later section that's coming up right now. But before moving on, I'm gonna have to ask you to hit subscribe. A lot of work goes into these videos and it'll really help me out if you did that. I don't want to linger too long on this though, so let's get back into the video. For the rest of the challenge, the game would take on a much different form for me. The games would be less scrambly, the game plan was starting to solidify, and the pace of play was overall going to increase. I was also just having overall more fun labbing out certain attacks or sequences to the point where I'd just lay down in the middle of the night until suddenly an idea hits me and I rush over to my PC to go quickly lab it out. And a lot of those ideas that would hit me came from just this one mechanic, the assists. Up until this point, I knew assists were a thing and I tried throwing them around in matches without much success, but that was until I realized you can use these things strategically. Assists soon became a huge part of my offensive pressure and the sequences like this one on Echo, where I could hit confirm medium heavy on block into a forward special, a move which normally could be easily punished, but with the correctly timed double assist to cover, I made a sequence that I thought was good enough to bring into matches. Now, yes, this pressure is kinda fake, but it definitely got me more into the labbing process for this game and fighting games in general, cause even if this sucked, at least it was something I did and came up with myself. I would do something similar for Yasuo, and in the process of all of this lab work, I thought I might as well get some other practice out of the way while I was at it. I learned this new combo from a video of Sonic Fox doing it. It's a pretty nice little mix-up that Echo can do solo, though the timing is a little bit tight. I learned a better bread and butter for Yasuo that took a bit of getting used to, but once I was, it was pretty consistent. And finally, one more weird, probably fake block string on Yasuo for some more offensive pressure. I can't express how cool the game felt as I found all of these little neat tricks I could use the assist mechanic for. If you play tag fighters already, this might all seem like pretty basic common knowledge stuff, but for me it felt like a whole new experience. Should I be playing more tag fighters? Yeah, I probably should, shouldn't I? Marvel video coming in, I don't know, whenever I find the time to it. After all that lab work though, you'd think I'd be totally ready and at least decently prepared to take on more matches, right? Well, no, for a couple reasons. Firstly, it takes a while for your lab work to take effect on your gameplay since the lab's a very different environment. And secondly, everybody was good now. Okay, so as far as I know, and this could be wrong, this alpha playtest did have some sort of skill-based matchmaking in casual mode, and I think I just barely entered the range of people who know what they're doing in fighting games and that would kick my ass in any other game, so I just got mauled for like the first 30 games in a row, and anytime I did win against anyone, I'd get one and done. Now, I know this might sound like I'm complaining here, but honestly, a part of me was glad I was just getting beat the fuck up, cause it made landing these combos all the more satisfying. Look, people can be better than me all they want, but at the end of the day, you know who's getting better from these matches? This guy. I started playing faster now, though still being pretty passive, so the game flew by a lot quicker, but now that my opponents actually knew what they were doing, I was having to learn to adapt on the fly, which was kinda hard in a game where you're going a million miles an hour, with scrambles happening every other interaction. That's a bit of an over-exaggeration, but you kinda get my point here. The game was really fast. It was a good fast, one that you could get used to and that keeps you guessing every moment, but still a bit overwhelming for my Street Fighter, Tekken, Granblue brain to keep up with consistently. I also tried going for that mix-up setup a lot, but most of the time would just mess something up in the execution, though I did hit one guy with it and it felt amazing. I've been watching this clip every day ever since. By the end of this section, I implemented a ton. I started to hit confirm better, the Yasuo combo was coming along pretty consistently, and I capitalized on a couple good pressure situations. But I was still lacking that game plan, that strategy that ultimately pulled everything together and gave some sense of direction to where I should be going in or playing around. There's not much time left in the Alpha Lab, so let's make the most of what's left. Okay, so here's the game plan, that I kinda just stole from this Diaphone video. Echo, I've already been playing pretty defensively, so if I'm gonna play like a bitch, I'm gonna be a bitch with a Time Winder in front of him. This way, if they jump, I can anti-air, and if they back up, I can run up and press. Super simple stuff, nothing too extraordinary. Yasuo just do the opposite, start sending medium in their face, reversal a lot, or at least more than I'm used to in other games, and always go for the best combo I knew. First things first though, I needed an anti-air combo for Echo, and I just went with what I was already doing for my normal damage combo, just with a couple attacks cut out. For Yasuo anti-airs, I'm gonna be honest, I couldn't think of shit. Like, yeah, if I'm in stance then it's pretty easy, but doing that on reaction was way too hard, and I couldn't find anything off of crouching heavy, so I'm gonna just take the L on this one and just do that. I probably could have found something if I looked for it, but oh well. With all of this out of the way and done, I just need to learn one last thing. Push block and retreating guard. I don't know why, but I just haven't been able to pull these off consistently. Maybe I'm timing it wrong or just straight not reacting fast enough, but these would more often result in a dash coming out instead of a push, and that just kinda sucks. But I didn't have too much time to worry about that and just had to go for it, cause it was time for the last 100 games. And with that, the Alpha Lab was done. So what are my final thoughts on the state of the game right now? I think it's in a really good spot. Some common complaints I've seen thrown around are the combos taking too long or the cinematics being a little on the bland side, and while I might just be used to both of those because of my start in Melty Blood, the amount of depth in this game, just with these 6 characters alone, is fantastic, and it overshadowed all of those issues for me. I didn't even get into some of the parts of the game that I thought were actually super cool, like the different fuses, and how I like that combos are actually hard and require a ton of practice before mastery. I think this game is headed in the right direction, and there will be a lot of personality coming out in watching and playing it when it officially comes out. Strive 3v3 was better though.